The battlefield was silent, but the silence was not peaceful. It was heavy, like a blanket of fear covering everything. The ground was broken, filled with craters and smoke rising slowly into the black sky. The stars above were hidden by clouds of ash. It looked as if the universe itself wanted to turn its face away from this place. In the middle of this ruin stood one man, a human soldier. His armor was cracked, his body tired, his face covered with dust and blood. But his eyes were still alive, sharp and watchful. He was alone, or at least he believed so. The other soldiers, human and alien, were gone, either dead or vanished into the dark. The soldier's name was Captain Eric. But here, names no longer mattered. What mattered was survival, and perhaps something more. He felt the air around him shift, cold and strange. It was not only the night that made him shiver, it was something else, something alive, something. Hiding in the shadows, he raised his broken rifle, scanning the ruins. His ears caught a faint sound, a whisper, so soft it could have been the wind, but it was not the wind. The voice seemed to call his name, Eric. The sound slithered across the battlefield, echoing in his skull. He spun around, pointing his weapon, but there was nothing, only darkness. Fear tried to climb into his heart, but he pushed it back. Humans were good at that, turning fear into fire. He whispered to himself. You're not alone, not yet. He stepped forward, his boots crunching on broken stone. The whisper came again, closer this time. Eric. The sound was soft, almost gentle, but filled with hunger, like something calling him deeper, drawing him closer to the shadows. The aliens who had fought here spoke of a living darkness. They said it moved like smoke, spreading across the land, swallowing all light. They feared it so much they refused to face it. But humans were different. They did not turn away when fear called their name. And now, Eric was proof of that, standing alone where no one else dared. He walked past the fallen machines, their metal twisted and glowing faintly from heat, past the bodies of soldiers who would never rise again. The whisper followed him, soft, steady, patient. At times it sounded like his own voice, speaking back to him. At times it sounded like someone he had once loved. It tempted him, confused him, but he kept moving. The deeper he went, the darker it became. The night seemed to thicken, wrapping around him like liquid shadow. Even the broken fires in the ruins began to fade. He felt the weight of it pressing on his chest, heavy and suffocating. But inside him, there was a small spark. It was not light, not yet, but it was something strong, his will, the thing that made humans stand when others fell. He remembered his crew, his friends. He remembered the promise he made before they entered this war. I will not let the darkness win. The memory gave him strength, and his footsteps grew louder. The whisper, however, did not stop. It grew more clever, more dangerous. It spoke of rest, of peace, of letting go. It told him, lay down your weapon, Eric. There is nothing left to fight for. But he did not listen. Instead, he whispered back into the night, if you want me, then come and take me. The ruins groaned, as if the earth itself heard his challenge. For a moment, the air froze. No sound, no movement. Then the darkness shifted. Shapes began to move in the corner of his vision. Not soldiers, not machines, something else. Something formless, made of shadows and smoke. They crept closer, slow and careful. Their eyes glowed faintly like dying stars. Eric gripped his rifle tighter, though he knew the weapon would not be enough. He stood tall, refusing to bend, refusing to run. The whisper was now everywhere, around him, inside him. It filled his ears, his chest, his bones. It laughed without sound. It promised power if he surrendered, death if he resisted. Eric took a deep breath. He was only a man, but he was human, and humans did not bow to the dark. He whispered one last time, his voice steady and clear. You will not take me. Battlefield trembled as the shadow moved closer. The real fight had not even begun. But already, the air was thick with tension. The darkness was alive, and it had chosen him, but Eric was ready. In that silent battlefield, standing alone against an endless night, a new story was beginning, and though the world could not see it yet, a spark of light was waiting to be born. The night around Eric was no longer silent. The whispers had grown stronger, sharper, like claws scratching against his mind. He could feel them inside his chest, pressing against his heartbeat. Every step he took forward seemed to carry him deeper into a place where light had no meaning. Shadows shifted like waves of smoke, crawling across the ground and walls of broken machines. They were not just emptiness. They were alive, watching, waiting. Eric knew it. He felt it in the marrow of his bones. This was no natural darkness, no accident of war. It was an enemy older than the battle itself, something the aliens feared, but had chosen not to fight, something they tried to forget. Eric stopped, his boots crunching on shattered stone. The whisper slid into his ear again, soft and mocking. "You fight alone. You are already dead." He ignored it, but his hands tightened around his broken rifle. The weapon gave him little comfort. He had fought enemies of flesh and steel, but this was a different kind of war. A war against fear itself, he thought. Of the aliens, those who had fought beside humans, brave in their own way, but never willing to face this shadow. He had heard their stories, rumors passed around the campfires. They said the darkness was not born here, it had come from beyond. Drifting through the stars like a parasite, worlds had fallen before it, civilizations erased. And yet, no one remembered their names. The darkness made sure of that, swallowing memory itself. Eric felt a shiver crawl across his back. He realized then why the aliens never spoke of it openly. They were not just afraid of dying in its grasp. They were afraid of being erased, forgotten forever. To them, death was not the true horror oblivion was. The whisper seemed to hear his thoughts. It laughed inside his mind. "Human, you think you matter, but when the last spark fades, even your people will be dust in the dark." Eric gritted his teeth. Humans had heard this before, through history, through war, through despair. Always there were voices that said, "You are weak. You will fail, you will vanish." And always, humanity had answered with the same defiance. "No, we will not." He pressed forward. Walking deeper into the ruins, the night thickened, wrapping him tighter. The broken sky above seemed to bend lower, as if the universe itself wanted to crush him. But with every step, he felt his resolve sharpen. This darkness was not just an enemy. It was a test, and he would not fail. From the corner of his eye something moved. A figure, tall and thin, stepping out of the black. It had no clear form. Its body was made of shifting smoke. But its eyes burned faintly red. It tilted its head at him, curious. Eric raised his weapon, but the figure only smiled. The whisper came from its mouth now, a low hiss. "Why do you resist, human? Do you not crave peace? Lay down your fire. Let the dark carry you." Eric steadied his breath. Peace. It was not peace the shadow offered. It was silence, emptiness, the end of all that mattered. And humanity did not fight so long, so hard, only to vanish quietly. He fired, the shot tearing through the smoke. The bullet cut through the figure, breaking it apart. But instead of falling, the shadow reformed. It laughed again, louder, crueler. More shapes emerged, crawling from the ruins. Dozens of them, their glowing eyes circling him like predators. Eric felt the weight of their gaze pressing down. They moved slowly, like they had all the time in the world. Because maybe they did. To them, he was just one man, one moment. But he stood his ground. His voice cut through the cold air, steady and defiant. "I am human. We don't kneel to the dark." The shadows stopped, just for a moment. His words hung in the air like a spark. They did not understand him, not fully. For creatures of endless night could not understand why humans burned so brightly, even when surrounded by death. And yet, the whisper grew sharper, angrier. "You are nothing. We have ended greater than you. Your light will fade like theirs." Eric's heart pounded, but he smiled. Because he knew something the shadows did not. Humanity had always been small compared to the universe, but size had never been their strength. Their strength was there. With the refusal to stop, the refusal to break. Even when the enemy was larger, stronger, older, humans fought and kept fighting. The ruins around him creaked as the shadows closed in. He tightened his grip, every nerve alive with fire. If this was the forgotten enemy, the terror that erased worlds, then let it come. He would not turn away. He would not be forgotten, and maybe, just maybe, the darkness itself would learn to fear the fire of a human heart. The whisper shrieked, furious now. The battle with the forgotten enemy had only begun. But Eric's defiance had already drawn a line in the dark, and for the first time, the shadows hesitated. The shadows circled him like hungry wolves. Their eyes glowed faintly, red and cold, their forms shifting like smoke caught in a storm. Every whisper pressed harder into his mind. Fall, human. Give in. Let the dark swallow you. Eric's chest burned as he took each breath. The air itself felt poisoned, heavy with despair. The battlefield that once rang with screams and fire was now a graveyard of silence. But he refused to let silence claim him. His hands trembled on the broken rifle, not from fear, but from exhaustion. He had been fighting for so long, and yet his spirit still refused to break. The darkness moved closer. Shadows stretched across the ground, creeping toward his boots like black rivers. The whisper grew louder, filling his skull with voices. Some sounded like his dead comrades, others like his family. Stop fighting, Eric. Rest, you cannot win. For a moment his knees buckled. The weight of grief, of loneliness, of endless battle pressed down on him, and in that moment he understood why the aliens had given up, why they refused to face the forgotten enemy. But he also remembered why. Humans were different. He thought of Earth, of the billions of voices that once laughed, cried, and dreamed beneath the same stars. He thought of the stories of those who came before him, how humans had faced hunger, war, and even the void of space. Always fragile, always small, but never surrendering. Every trial had only sharpened them, forged them, and he whispered to himself, "We fight because we must. Because if we stop, everything ends." His voice was weak, but it carried strength. The shadows hissed, recoiling as if the words themselves were a blade. They did not understand this stubbornness, this endless defiance that burned even when logic said it should die. Eric pushed himself up straighter, planting his boots firmly on the broken ground. His shoulders squared, his breath steadied, and he felt something stir inside him. Not light, not yet, but a fire no darkness could smother. The shadows lunged, swift and sharp. Claws of black smoke lashed out at him, cutting the air. Eric swung his rifle like a club, smashing through one shape, then another. Each strike tore them apart, but they reformed instantly. They laughed, cruel and endless. "You cannot kill us, human. You are nothing but dust waiting to fall." Eric's arms ached. His weapon cracked further, but still, he fought. Every swing of the rifle was not just steel against shadow, it was his will. It was every human who ever refused to bow. He shouted with each strike, "I am not dust, I am not nothing. I am human." His voice rang out, echoing through the battlefield. For the first time, the shadows paused. Their laughter broke, replaced by silence. Eric could feel it. His will was hurting them, not his weapon, not his strength, but his refusal to surrender. He laughed bitterly through the blood on his lips. "You thought fear would break me. You thought whispers would chain me. You don't understand humans at all." The shadows writhed, twisting in frustration. They had consumed worlds, devoured civilizations, erased names from history. But never before had they faced something like this. A man too weak to stand by their measure, yet too strong to bend by his spirit. The whisper grew desperate. It shifted its voice, turning softer, pleading. "Eric, you are tired, you are broken. Let us end your pain. Let us give you peace." The words nearly cracked his heart. For deep inside, he did want rest. He wanted to close his eyes and let the endless struggle fade. But then he saw his crews. Faces in his memory. He heard their laughter, their cries, their promises. And he remembered what he carried, the hope of those who could not fight anymore. "No," he growled. His voice shook, but it was firm. "You will not have me, and you will not erase us." The spark inside him burned brighter. The shadows hissed, pulling back as if scorched. Eric dropped his broken rifle, his hands free. His body trembling, he raised his fists, weak but steady. "You want me? Then fight me. But know this, I will not stop until you do." The battlefield shuddered as if the ground itself heard his challenge. The shadows swarmed him, countless hands of black reaching for his chest, his face, his heart. They wanted to crush him, to drown him, to smother his fire. But the fire would not die. Even as pain tore through him, even as his strength drained away, Eric's spirit blazed. Every breath he took was rebellion. Every step he made was defiance. He was one man against endless darkness. But he was human, and that was enough. As the night closed around him, the spark inside his chest began to glow faintly. It was small, fragile, almost invisible, but it was there, a seed of light born not from strength, but from will. The shadows froze, hissing in confusion. They had seen fire, weapons, even suns, but never this, never the raw, stubborn will of a single heart burning against the void. Eric stood, bloodied, shaking, but alive. He whispered into the night, his voice hoarse yet unbroken. "You cannot kill what refuses to die." And with that, the first spark of light flickered. In the dark, a promise of the battle yet to come, a sign that even against the forgotten enemy, humanity's willpower could not be erased. The battlefield was no longer just ruins and ash. It had changed into something darker, something unnatural. The ground beneath Eric's boots pulsed faintly, as if the earth itself had veins filled with shadow. Every step he took sank into the black dust, leaving no trace behind. It felt like the world was trying to erase him before he even reached his goal. The whisper had stopped calling his name. Now it spoke only in low chants, rising and falling like waves. The sound pressed against his ears, twisting into words he did not understand, alien, ancient, heavy with meaning too dark to carry. Yet he understood enough. It was summoning him. It wanted him deeper, closer. Into the core of this nightmare, Eric pushed forward, his body weak but his will stronger. The faint glow in his chest pulsed with every heartbeat. He did not know what it was, but he knew it was his only weapon. The rifle was useless, his fists were failing, but the spark, small as it was, kept him alive, kept him moving, and with every step, the shadows hissed louder, as if afraid of the light it carried. The air grew colder. Frost formed along the broken walls of fallen machines. The darkness here was thicker, liquid-like, pouring from cracks in the earth. And then he saw it, the core of shadows. It rose in the distance like a tower of black smoke twisting endlessly into the sky. Its shape shifted every second, never solid, never still. Faces appeared in the smoke, faces of the dead, faces of those forgotten. They cried, they screamed, they begged for release, but all of them were lies. Eric knew. The core was alive, and it fed on fear, on despair. This was the heart of the forgotten enemy. This was what had erased worlds. The whisper returned, louder now, echoing from the core itself. "Human, why do you come? You cannot fight eternity. You cannot fight us." Eric clenched his fists, his eyes sharp. "I didn't come to fight eternity," he shouted back. "I came to fight you." The core shuddered, its smoke twisting violently. The ground split open, spilling rivers of shadow that reached for his legs. Eric jumped back, rolling across the blackened dirt. Hands of smoke clawed at him, sharp and endless, but he tore free, stumbling forward. He could not stop, not now. Not when he stood at the very heart of it. The core shifted again, and from it stepped a figure, taller than any soldier, wrapped in smoke and fire. Its eyes glowed with an endless hunger. Its voice was 1,000 whispers at once. You are small, fragile. Even your spark will fade. Surrender, and I will give you peace. Eric's chest tightened, the spark flickering inside him. For a moment, the weight of the voice nearly broke him. It was not just speaking to him, it was speaking to his soul. It showed him visions, his body falling to the ground. His name erased, his people forgotten. A universe without humans, empty and silent. The temptation was there, sharp and cruel. He could end his pain now, let go, sink into nothingness. But then he remembered what it meant to be human, not to win. Every battle, not to live forever, but to fight, even when the fight seemed impossible. To stand, even when the world demanded you fall. The spark in his chest flared brighter. He forced his legs to move, one step forward, then another, until he stood before the towering shadow. I don't need peace, he said, his voice steady though his body shook. I need hope, and hope is stronger than you, the core screamed. A sound that split the battlefield. The shadows around him writhed, twisting violently. The figure raised its arms, and black fire rained down from the sky. Eric threw himself forward, the spark burning hotter in his chest. The fire seared his skin, burned his armor, but he kept going, closer, closer, until he could see the smoke shifting like flesh, until he could feel the cold of its presence pressing against his bones. The figure struck, claws of shadow slicing through the air. Eric dodged barely, the edge of the attack cutting across his shoulder. Pain flared, but he clenched his teeth, refusing to fall. He swung his arm, not with a weapon, but with his will. The spark flared outward, spilling a faint light into the darkness. The shadow staggered back, hissing, its form trembling. It was not much, but it was enough. For the first time, the core had felt pain. Eric fell to his knees, gasping, his strength nearly gone. But he laughed, blood dripping down his lips. You're not untouchable after all, the figure roared, the core shaking violently. The ground split wider, shadows pouring like rivers around him, but Eric did not fear it. He knew now, the spark inside him was not just his. It was the fire of every human who had ever stood against the dark. And that fire would never go out. The core gathered itself, pulling its smoke into a massive shape. It towered above him, a storm of living night. Eric wiped the blood from his mouth, stood tall, and whispered, "Then let's finish this." The battle for the heart of darkness had truly begun. The core of shadows roared, its voice shaking the ruins like thunder. Black fire rolled across the battlefield, burning away what little remained of the world. The sky above tore open, spilling rivers of smoke that fell like rain. Eric stood in the middle of it all, a single man against a storm of living night. His body trembled, his armor cracked and broken. Every muscle screamed in pain, every breath felt heavier than the last. But the spark inside his chest pulsed brighter, pushing him to stand. He could feel it now, not just heat, not just light, but a living force, something old, something deep, something that answered his will. The core's towering figure bent down, its glowing eyes burning into him. You are nothing, it hissed. You are weak. One man against eternity. Give me your spark, and I will spare you. The words slithered into his mind like chains. They tempted him with silence, with release. But he clenched his fists, his teeth grinding against the pressure. No, he whispered. I am human. And humans don't surrender. The spark inside him flared, for the first time. A faint golden light burst from his chest. It spread across his armor, searing cracks of light through the darkness clinging to him. The core shrieked, pulling back. The shadows around him writhed, twisting away from the glow. Eric's eyes widened, breath-catching. The light was real, alive, responding to his will. He took a step forward, and the ground beneath him lit faintly, each footprint glowing as though fire was carved into the earth. The core lashed out, claws of smoke slamming down at him. But when they touched the light, they hissed and dissolved. Eric raised his arm, not in fear, but in defiance. The spark surged again, Forming a shield of golden fire around him, the claws broke apart, scattering like dust. The aliens who watched from the edges of the battlefield gasped, hidden in their shelters. They had believed the human would die. They had seen countless warriors swallowed by the core, never to rise again. But now, one fragile man stood glowing in the dark. For the first time they saw the shadows retreat. For the first time they saw something fight back. Eric shouted, his voice carrying across the ruins. You call yourself eternal, but even eternity can break when faced with hope. The spark responded, his chest burning like a sun. Golden flames burst outward, ripping through the shadows around him. The battlefield lit up, and for the first time since the war began, light returned. The core screamed, its tower of smoke twisting violently. It shrank, pulling its strength into one massive shape. A giant made of shadow, blacker than night. With eyes burning red, it slammed its fists into the ground, sending shockwaves that shattered stone and fire. Eric was thrown back, rolling across the dirt. The shield of light flickered, nearly breaking. Pain tore through his body, but the spark pulsed stronger. It refused to die, just as he refused to fall. On his knees, blood dripping from his lips, he laughed. You don't get it, do you? The core roared, striking again. Eric forced himself to stand, raising both arms. The spark burst outward, forming blades of golden light in his hands. He swung with all his strength, cutting through the massive shadow's arm. The core howled as the limb dissolved into smoke. The aliens watching cried out in disbelief. The human had wounded the darkness itself. Eric staggered but did not stop. He charged forward, striking again and again. Each swing cut through the core's body, each strike carving holes of light into its form. The core writhed, shaking the world with fury. It struck back, claws tearing across Eric's side. Pain exploded in his ribs, but he roared back. His spark flared so bright it blinded the shadows. The battlefield was now a storm of black and gold. Every clash between them sent waves of light and dark across the ruins. The air itself split, the ground shattering under their power. But though Eric bled, though his body screamed for rest, the spark refused to dim. It grew with his will, his defiance, his hope. At last, he raised both blades of light and drove them into the core's chest. The shadow screamed, its form breaking apart. A burst of golden fire tore through the battlefield. For a moment, night itself seemed to vanish. The stars above shone again, cutting through the ash. Eric fell to the ground gasping. The blades of light vanished, leaving only the glow in his chest. The core staggered, its massive form dissolving. But it did not die. Instead, it shrank back into the tower of smoke. The whispers returned, angrier than ever. This is not over. The light will fade. And when it does, you will belong to us. Eric forced himself to his feet, his chest burning. He pointed into the dark, his voice steady. No, the spark has awakened, and it will never fade. The shadows trembled, retreating deeper into the core. For the first time, the darkness was afraid, and for the first time, Eric believed they could win. The battlefield was quiet again, but it was not the same silence as before. It was heavier, broken by the fading screams of the core of shadows. The black tower twisted in the distance, shrinking back into itself. Its whispers echoed low, like a storm retreating over the horizon. The ground still pulsed with veins of shadow. But they no longer reached for him. They curled back, trembling, as if they feared the faint golden glow still burning in Eric's chest. Eric staggered forward, his legs weak, his armor shattered. Every wound screamed with pain, every breath cut like glass, yet he stood, because standing was all he knew. The spark had awakened, and though it burned inside him, it kept him alive. He felt its warmth flow through his blood. Fighting the poison of the shadows, it was not just light, it was life. And for the first time since the war began, he felt stronger than his own fear. From the ruins nearby, alien eyes watched him. They had hidden in cracks, in broken halls. Waiting for his end, they had seen countless warriors vanish into the darkness. never to return. But this human, this fragile creature of flesh and bone, had walked into the core itself and come back. Some whispered among themselves in disbelief, others in awe. Their hearts trembled, not from fear of the shadow now, but from something new, from hope. Eric felt their eyes on him. He turned, his chest still glowing faintly. For a moment, the aliens flinched, as though his light would burn them. But then one of them stepped forward, an elder with silver skin and deep black eyes. The alien's voice was quiet, filled with disbelief. No one has ever returned from the core. Eric's lips curved into a tired smile. Well, he said, his voice hoarse, there's a first time for everything. The elder bowed his head slowly behind him. More aliens emerged, their gazes fixed on the spark glowing in Eric's chest. It was small, fragile, flickering against the endless night, but it was real. And in a world drowned by shadow, even the smallest flame could change everything. The core shifted in the distance, its voice rising again. You cannot escape me. Light cannot live forever. I will return stronger than before. Its words slithered across the ruins like venom. The alien stepped back in fear, but Eric did not. He raised his hand, the spark glowing brighter in answer. His voice rang out, strong despite the blood. In his throat, no, you may return, you may fight again, but know this, the darkness will never stand unchallenged again. Not while humans breathe, not while hope burns, the core hissed, its tower trembling. Then with one final shriek, it sank back into the earth. The black smoke faded, leaving behind the sky filled with faint stars. The night was still dark, but no longer absolute. There was space for light now, space for hope. Eric fell to his knees, exhausted. The golden glow in his chest dimmed, settling into a steady flicker. It would not fade, he knew that now. It was part of him, part of humanity itself. The aliens rushed forward, surrounding him cautiously. Some knelt beside him, touching the glow with trembling hands. Their voices shook as they spoke. He brought light back. The human brought light. Eric looked at them, his tired eyes sharp. You thought the darkness was eternal, but it isn't. It can bleed, it can fear, and if it can fear, it can be defeated. The elder looked at him with something more than awe. It was respect, the kind given not to a soldier, but to a leader. You have done what none of us could. The elder whispered. You faced the heart of the shadow and returned with light. Eric shook his head, forcing himself to stand again. I didn't do this alone, he said, his voice steady. Every step I took, every strike I made, it was because I carried the will of my people. Humans fight, even when the fight seems lost. That is our spark, and now it's yours too. The aliens exchanged glances, their fear slowly shifting into something else. They straightened, their shoulders no longer bent by despair. The light in Eric's chest reflected in their eyes. The darkness had wounded them for so long, but now they saw another path. They saw that even in endless night, one spark could guide them. Eric looked back at the broken battlefield. The ruins still smoldered, the air still heavy with ash, but it no longer felt like a graveyard. It felt like the beginning of something. The return from darkness was not just his victory, it was theirs. It was everyone's. He raised his head to the sky, the stars faint but visible again. He whispered to himself, though all around him heard, this isn't the end. This is the start of the fight that matters. And in that moment, the spark glowed brighter, not just inside him, but in the hearts of those who watched. The darkness had not been destroyed, but for the first time, it had been forced to retreat. And for the first time, hope had returned. The battlefield was quiet, but it was no longer the silence of death. It was a silence filled with breath, with beating hearts, with the trembling of survivors who dared to hope again. Eric stood among them, the spark glowing faintly in his chest, steady like a star in the night. The aliens gathered around him, their eyes reflecting the golden light. For the first time in generations, they did not whisper in fear of the darkness. They whispered in awe of the human who had returned. The elder with silver skin stepped forward, his voice low and reverent. "You carry what we have lost," he said. "The light we believed could never rise again." Eric shook his head, his face weary but unyielding. "No. This spark was never lost. It was waiting for someone to believe in it. Darkness can cover the world, but it cannot kill hope." The aliens listened, their heads bowed. They had fought many wars, built empires, seen stars fall, yet they had forgotten something simple. They had forgotten that strength did not only come from weapons or armies. It came from the will to stand when everything told you to fall. Eric's voice carried across the ruins, strong despite his pain. "You think I fought alone, but I didn't. Every human who ever refused to give up stood with me. Every story of survival, every fight, every sacrifice, they all burned inside me. That is what this spark is. It is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us. And now it belongs to you too." The aliens raised their heads slowly. In their eyes, something new was forming: courage. The darkness had ruled them for so long that they had forgotten courage even existed. But now, standing before them was proof that even the forgotten enemy could bleed. And if it could bleed, it could be defeated. The core of shadows was gone, for now hidden deep beneath the earth, but its whispers still lingered in the wind, promising it would return. Eric felt the weight of that promise. He knew this was not the end, only a pause. The true war was still waiting in the shadows, but he also knew something else. He would not face it alone, not anymore. The elder placed a hand on Eric's shoulder. "We feared the dark for centuries, but you have shown us another path. You have given us something no weapon ever could. You have given us hope." Eric met his gaze, his own voice steady. "Then stand with me. When the darkness comes again, we fight together. No species alone, no voices silenced. Together, we will burn brighter than the night." A murmur spread through the crowd of aliens. They looked at one another, their fears slowly breaking into determination for the first time. They saw themselves not as prey to the darkness, but as fighters, and it was because of one human who carried a spark. The sky above cleared, stars burning faintly through the ash. Eric lifted his gaze, feeling the warmth in his chest. The spark glowed brighter in answer to the stars. It was not a weapon, not a machine, not something that could be built or stolen. It was a truth, that light was born wherever there was will, that hope was eternal as long as someone carried it. The aliens began to gather the wounded, their movements quicker now. Not desperate, but purposeful. Eric helped where he could, his body broken, but his spirit strong. Every time someone looked at him, he saw the reflection of this spark in their eyes. It was spreading, slowly but surely, and that was enough when the work was done. When the survivors rested, the elder spoke once more. "The darkness will come again," he said. "We know this. We all feel it. But now we will not hide. Now we will not run. We will fight, because you have shown us how." Eric nodded. His voice was quiet, but it carried like fire in the cold air. "The darkness will always come, but so will the light, as long as someone carries it. The night can never win." He looked around at the faces of those who had once only known fear. Now they stood taller, their shoulders straight, their eyes steady. It was not his spark anymore, it was theirs too. The return from darkness had become the rise of light. As the first faint glow of dawn broke across the horizon, the battlefield lit up in soft gold. Ash drifted in the wind like falling stars. Eric stood in the center, the spark in his chest glowing like a second sun. He was just one man, but he was not alone anymore. The darkness had not been destroyed, but it had been wounded, and that wound would never heal, because now the universe remembered. Now every voice whispered the same truth, that light could be fought for, that hope could burn even in endless night, and that one human, fragile but unbroken, had carried a spark that would guide them all.